class. Today we'll be learning about character traits. I want to ask you a few questions. Is the Easter Bunny white or is the Easter Bunny black? Is Santa a mean guy or is he a nice guy? A character trait is descriptive adjectives like happy or sad that tell us specific qualities of a character. We will read a bad case of stripes and try to identify character traits. We will now begin reading A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, but she wanted to fit in. Camilla always worried about what other people thought of her. Today, she was even more frightened than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There are so many people to impress. She tried on 22 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. She then screamed. Her mother ran into the room, and she screamed too. "Oh my heavens," she cried. "You're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered. "But just look at me." You get back in this bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, and she was afraid of what the other kids would say. And she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. So, what might we think Camilla, or some traits about Camilla are? I think that Camilla is nervous about starting the first day of school. I think she's nervous because of all the stripes. She might also feel embarrassed to go in front of all her friends and show them how they are. Also, maybe Camilla feels like she is sad. She could be feeling sad. So sad, confused, afraid, those are all character traits. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. "Most extraordinary," he exclaimed. "I have never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncomfortable twitching?" "No," Camilla told him. "I feel fine." "Well then," Mr. Bumble said, turning to Miss Cream, "I don't see any reason why you shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. So what might we say about Mr. Bumble from looking at this picture? He looks old. Older, right? Like an older man. We also know that he's a doctor, so he could be smart. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon, the Knight of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. How do we think Camilla was feeling when she was up in front of her class and her stripes turned into red, white, and blue? She was probably feeling very, very nervous, very, very sad, embarrassed. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard," and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camila was changing faster than you could change channels on a TV. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to ask you to keep Camila home from school. She just ate much. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from other parents. They're afraid those strips might be contagious." Camila was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. How do you think she's feeling? Sad, yeah. Very mad. Maybe she's angry. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camila. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. "Well, yes, I see," Mr. Bumble mumbled when he seen Mrs. Cream. "I think I'd better bring in the specialists. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Mr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them as the Creams. "This is Mr. Grapp, Mr. Sponge, Mr. Cricket, and Mr. Young." Then the specialists went to work on Camila. They sneezed and jabbed, tapped, and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Mr. Grapp. "Or the measles," said Mr. Sponge. "Definitely not chicken pox," put in Mr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Mr. Young. "Try these," said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. "Take one of each before bed," said Mr. Grapp. Then they filled out the door, followed by Mr. Bumble. So as good readers, while we're reading a book, we think about the characters. We think about what the characters might look like, how they're feeling, what they're doing, what they're saying. We know right now that Camila Cream is very nervous, very afraid. She's worried and embarrassed. Let's continue. That night, Camila took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different. When she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with her face on it. Look at this picture. She must have felt so scared when she saw herself like that. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called. But this time, instead of the specialist, he brought the experts. Dr. Grad and Dr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camila was poked, looked at, and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Crow finally spoke. "It might be a virus," he announced. Suddenly Fuzzy with little virus balls appeared all over Camila. "Or possibly some form of bacteria," said Mr. Mellon. Out popped little bacteria trails. "Or it could be a fungus," added Dr. Gound. Instantly, Camila was covered with different colored fungus. The experts looked at Camila, then at each other. "We need to go over these numbers again, back at the lab. We'll call you when we know something," but the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. By now, the TV news had found out about Camila. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd was camped out in front of the lawn. I would like you guys to now turn and talk to your partners and describe 2 character traits of Camilla Cream. You guys can do that now. What did we learn about Camilla? We'll continue reading and see if we find any more character traits on her. The Creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies, from allergist, physics, an old medicine man, even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was so hard to even recognize her. She spotted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and long furry tails, but nothing worked. Camilla Cream could be feeling like she was ugly, right? Because this is her now. One day, a woman who called herself a therapist claimed she would cure Camilla. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe deeply and become one with your room. I wish you hadn't said that, Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls, or her room. Her bed became her mouth. Her nose was a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. What are we going to do? Cried Mrs. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. She began to sob. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. How do you think Camilla Cream might be feeling now? Excited? Happy? I think she's feeling excited and happy. She went into Camilla's room and looked around. My goodness, she said, with a shake of her head. What we have here is a bad case of stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, this might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Mrs. Cream. Oh my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I bet you'd like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big, heaping plateful of lima beans, more than just anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh dear, the old woman said sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bag and started toward the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd seen going through. She finally couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The truth is, I really love lima beans. I thought so, the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. Mmm, said Camilla. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and tails began to disappear. Then the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. I'm cured, she shouted. Yes, said the old woman. I knew the real you was in there somewhere. She patted Camilla on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. How do you think Camilla is feeling now? Probably very excited and happy that she's finally herself. Afterward, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had even a touch of stripes again. I bet you Camilla Cream was feeling very grateful now that she didn't have those stripes. Okay, I want you boys and girls to go into your books, The Mockingbird. I want you guys to read the first 3 chapters and take notes on character traits that you see in the characters. Okay? Thank you very much.